Hi there, my name is Cora May, and today we're sharing with you guys my predictions for healers in 10.1 Mythic Plus in tier list format, of course. So just to start off with a little context of going from Season 1 to Season 2. Season 1, we saw a lot of heavy healing checks. We also saw those healing checks heavily nerfed as the season went on, and we saw a lot of the healers that were struggling at the beginning to even get through some of these bosses getting buffed. Going into Season 2, I am expecting there's at least a few bosses that look like they're going to be really scary. But I think in comparison to Dragonflight Season 1, we can expect an easier dungeon pool to kind of get through. I don't know, it's all going to come down to tuning on Blizzard's part, of course. There's a few outliers, but for the most part, I think we're expecting less stringent healing checks. I think that's going to put a bigger emphasis this tier on having healers that can bring DPS and also the utility they can bring. Also, we're factoring in what other classes we think are be meta. So right now, the predicted meta is going to be Prop Paladin again, which does bring a lot of stops. But the predicted DPS are a lot of ranged DPS, especially things like Shadow Priest, Fire Mage, Boomkin, maybe Warlock. Like all these ranged classes don't have obviously a lot of kicks, and they don't have a lot of AoE stops. While there are also less kicks in Season 2, having stops and things like that is still going to help your dungeon go more smoothly. So in this tier list, I'm going to be taking into account the ability to get through healing checks, the DPS that is brought, the utility that makes up for if that is the meta that's going forward, which is the predicted meta, and then also things like buffs other than like, you know, like Mark of the Wild and Lust, if it seems like in these metas we're not going to have access to that. Okay, so getting right into it, and this is my cat Messy, because somebody always asks, and he's going to hang out this entire time. I'm going to start from the top with Disc Priest. So Disc Priest actually ended up ending Season 1 in the top spot, if you were paying attention, just barely, but they are really powerful. They do a lot of single target damage, which is a huge emphasis for healers. That's like the best way to speed up dungeons, especially on tyrannical weeks, is your single target damage. They're also bringing PI, which is super valuable, of course, for most DPS. And then they have Power Word Fort, which helps you live. Sometimes they can be a little bit squishy, and their healing is actually really good. Ever since they buffed Power Word Radiance, where the direct like healing portion of Power Word Radiance is actually really powerful, their healing has felt like it's in a much better spot. If you played with it since they've changed the way like Shadow Covenant is played and stuff like that, it's actually pretty fun. It was something that I was definitely enjoying at the end of the season, and I'm going to be ranking it in A. So part of the reason I'm putting it A and not S is because Shadow Priest is looking absolutely bonkers. And part of the problem, it's not like you can't run like Disc and Shadow, but their utility being like Powered Fort is kind of redundant. There might not be enough like good viable targets for PI to make good use of it, depending on the rest of your group comp, although like with a lot of casters it could. But if you have Disc and Shadow, and then maybe two other range or just like one melee or something like that, Disc doesn't have a kick, and then Shadow has like a long kick, and both of them only have Psychic Scream as like an AoE stop. So I feel like you'd be pretty strapped for stops, and that is like the main thing that's like stopping me from wanting to put in S. I also think it's pretty hard to play. It's pretty well agreed on. This is one of the harder healers to pick up in Raid and in Mythic Plus. It can be pretty punishing. You have to play really proactively for damage. It's not a reactive healer. Like Powered Radiance gives them some reactive power, but for the most part, you're playing pretty proactive. You want to have good dungeon knowledge in order to make this class look good. Okay, moving on to Preservation Evoker. So Preservation Evoker at the start of the season was an absolute powerhouse. When the nerfs came with 10.07, they dropped, and it's like, I think the highest, let's see, the highest Evoker was in spot number 12, followed, like, so Disc, Resto Druid, Resto Shaman, and Holy Paladin all did better than them towards the end. A lot of the Evokers that are on the list are ones that basically after 10.07 didn't get any IO. Me included on my Evoker. I stopped getting IO after 10.07. I kind of just gave up. Yeah, it was super good, but they nerfed a lot of their healing, and then they also at the same time they buffed all these other specs. So a lot of these other specs are now better. They're also going to be losing damage going into 10.1 because they're losing their 4 set, which buffs their Living Flame damage, and they're also going to be giving up their staff most likely. I would not foresee them keeping that staff on. Their healing style in Mythic Plus is nerfed. Their tier set is kind of okay for Mythic Plus, but basically, moral of the story is I'm going to be putting them in B. They still bring Lust, so I think if there's like a meta where you need Lust, and I'll talk about later where I think the better Lust comes from, but if you ever need Lust and that other Lust falls out of the meta, I think that could catapult them up. They also have like nice utility with things like Bleed Dispel and stuff, which there's like a boss in like Oldemon, which looks like it has to do that, but it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot going for Evoker over the other specs. Now, that's not to say I think Evoker would have absolutely no trouble healing any of these bosses. I do not think that's a problem at all. I do not think that like healing through is a problem, but I do think that their damage is going to be like lower than everything that I'm going to be putting in S and A, and their utility is also worse or is better from the other healers I'm going to be putting into S and A. Okay, so next up is Holy Paladin. So Holy Paladin has traditionally been a powerhouse at Mythic Plus. This is usually due to the fact that they don't have to give up a lot of damage when they're doing healing, just because damage is part of their profile. They can do easy passive damage by having Consecrate down and just doing like their healing rotation, which includes doing things like, you know, like hitting Judgment and Crusader Strike and all that kind of stuff. They also have a pretty fun kit, I think, because they have access to Divine Toll, they get Sanctified Wrath with their wings, and then they also have Blessing of Summer, so that's less fun. And then they get a shield from their Blessing of Dusk now after they reworked that helped them become a lot more tanky. They have Wall on a short CD, they have an immunity, they have Blessing of Sack, which is absolutely insane. So it's a 40% DR on a 1 minute CD, and then also it lasts for 12 seconds, and then also like lingers for like an extra like 5 or 6 seconds with like a 15% DR or something like that. Anyways, moral of the story, the best external that you can get right now is absolutely from Holy Paladin. Their kind of weaknesses are right now is that like sometimes for like sustained healing fights, like you'll remember like they really struggled with something like Talixe, they struggled with something like the unpredictability of the first boss of Shadow Moon. Anything that's going to keep them out of melee range is also going to be a big problem for them. For the most part though, by playing well as a Holy Paladin and being proactive with like DRs, AM, Blessing of Sack, and just like planning out your CDs, it's totally possible to heal with Holy Paladin through any of these. It's just harder, and that's just kind of like a word of warning to you if you decide to play it. I think the biggest problems though with Holy Paladin right now, and that are also going to decide where I'm going to put them, is that number one, Prop Paladin is looking meta, and it makes a lot of their utility redundant. So like a lot of things that you can get from a Holy Paladin, like Sack, you can also get from a Prop Paladin, and those two classes don't synergize together very well. And then also their single target damage is pretty low. So with their new 4 set, they are getting a lot of damage because they can put down a lot more hammers because they're getting CR on it. They're also getting crazy holy power generation out of it, which means getting more shield with the righteouses. But both those things are pretty insignificant on single target damage. I was telling you just now how important single target damage was when I was talking about Disc Priest, and getting more AoE damage is nice, but it's not that big of a jump in their AoE damage, and their single target is still suffering, and that is like a big part of Mythic Plus. And so for that reason, I'm going to be putting them with Evokers in B. Do keep in mind that Holy Paladin is one of those classes, it's super sneaky. There have been several seasons where they weren't projected to do well and ended up doing well. I don't expect this to be a sneaky season where they kind of like creep up just because of Prop Paladin being as good as it is and kind of just like how their healing profile is, but I could be wrong, and I hope to see them do better than they are. Definitely a solid choice, amazing utility if you can play that well and your group can take advantage of it. Okay, so moving on to our next healer is going to be Holy Priest. Okay, so Holy Priest, I think so far has been like it feels like a lot of the other healers have gotten really good attention for making up for like the kind of things they're suffering from in Mythic Plus. Like Blizzard has definitely been paying attention to that. I feel like they've definitely missed the mark on adapting that for Holy Priest though. The only kind of like buff that Holy Priest has gotten since launch is they've gotten some aura buffs and they've got Divine Image buffed, but Divine Image also just caught a nerf because it's too powerful in Raid, so they're kind of having trouble doing the thing where they can separate Raid from Mythic Plus, kind of like power in a class. And I think that Holy Priest is it's definitely kind of suffering, even though it's going to have a good Raid tier. So most of their healing is super direct through heal and flash heal, and then they're using that to CR their other spells, including Power Word Sync, which is like their only like easy, just like, oh, I'm gonna press this and do AoE healing, and whereas the rest of it is heal and flash heal and Holy Word Serenity, and those are like their main heals, and those are just like all direct healing. So like what other classes do is like triage healing is, or like what feels like triage healing is actually like pretty similar to how like Holy Priest does it all the time. It also kind of feels a little bit like Holy Paladin with your main CD, which is Apotheosis, which is every 2 minutes, just like Wings. and it just makes it so that your relevant spells CDR your holy word spells more effectively. But again, it just feels like you're just like constantly going back and forth in your health bar and just like individually healing people and doing stuff like that, and it feels a bit frustrating. Their other like major CD is Divine Hymn. It's another one of those spells that's twice as effective in a 5-man dungeon. It's a channeled spell. However, it's pretty underwhelming. The biggest like power of Divine Hymn, and I guess the problem why they can't buff the direct healing of it, is that it also buffs everyone else's healing. So in a raid environment, it's really cool, but there's not a lot of other healing going on in your 5-man to take advantage of that increased healing percent taken. They do really bad on fights that require mobility because of all the casting they have to do. They don't have a lot of like ability to do things on the move. When they do want to use Sanct, they need everybody to be stacked up to get great value out of it. They are going to be relying a bit more on Prayer of Mending this tier due to their tier set that they're getting. In the past, this wasn't really a spell that you were pressing in Mythic Plus, but it seems like it's probably going to be a spell that you're pressing now in Mythic Plus. But it's like, it's a spell you now have to press to take advantage of your foresight. It's not like, oh, this spell is suddenly going to do a bunch of healing. And to me, that just feels like a loss. Like, you're having to press this extra global theoretically every 10 seconds to take advantage of it. Like, I don't think it's very good for Mythic Plus. It does buff their other holy words, but it's something that you have to do to take advantage of your tier set. It's not something like that is getting buffed by your tier set necessarily. So I don't like that for them either. They do pretty good damage now with Burning Vehemence, and they also bring PI, they bring Massive Spell, and they bring Mind Soothe. And all of those things are so good for being able to like speed up your dungeon. I think the only reason that I have to rank them so low is just because I think they still are going to struggle out of all the healers, struggle a little bit on some of these fights that require like movement during healing and just with their healing style and how it doesn't allow them to do damage during that. So I'm going to be putting them in C. I hope they can get some love from Blizzard, some like specific love for Mythic Plus for them going forward. Yeah. Okay, on to the next. I'm going to be talking about Mistweaver. So I think Mistweaver is actually going to be really good at Mythic Plus this tier. If you haven't paid attention, they actually do extremely high overalls at the end of dungeons, like higher than I've seen like most other healers do. So it's mostly AoE damage. They don't do as much single target, which I've been putting an emphasis on, which is kind of sucky, but they've had a lot of good changes in 10.1, making Ancient Teachings, which if you look at a healer's like a Mistweaver's breakdown in keys, like their highest heal is Ancient Teachings. It's now just a smart heal, which makes it a lot better inside of Mythic Plus. And then they've got like a reduced CD on Feline, which sometimes is a big deal, sometimes it isn't. It's just like a nice like quality of life change. And they've gotten access to things like Shaylun's Gift, and also some buffs to the direct healing of Vivify, and their tier set is going to at times buff the direct healing of Vivify. I think it's like 50% uptime. And all of those things I just mentioned are going to be really good for being able to do healing when you can't just rely on like your Ancient Teachings, Feline, Rising Mist type of healing to carry you, meaning like you can't be hitting the boss or that kind of healing just isn't enough. I think those changes are going to shore up a lot of the problems that Mistweaver has been having. Also, their tier gives them a lot of mana back, so before maybe you had to like sit and drink a little bit more, and now you don't have to sit and drink anymore. And so I think Mistweavers are actually in a really sick spot, and I'm looking forward to trying to play them myself in this tier. For that reason, I'm putting them in the A tier. So if you need a sign to try Mistweaver, I think this is going to be a good season for them. Okay, moving on to Resto Druid. So Resto Druid also did really well this last season. They ended in the second spot, like they were right behind by like 4 points behind the top disc priest. They do really solid healing. I think like out of like all the healers, they're probably consistently like the most like comfy healer, especially if you like, most pugs always prefer to play with a Resto Druid because it just does a lot of healing, and it has like good throughput outside of CDs, and also has really short CDs between Convoke, Flourish, and Shrink, and so it always has something to cover some kind of damage event. And even when it doesn't have those big CDs, it is really good. It's also bringing Mark of the Wild, which is arguably the best buff you can bring to Mythic Plus, because like other like damage debuffs, like, you know, like Chaos Brand and Monk buff and like Battle Shout and Arcane Intellect, they only either buff the casters or the melee or like some kind of like damage class, but they're never buffing the whole group. This is the only buff that it buffs your entire group, and also gives you a little bit of damage reduction. I think the main reason they weren't just like absolutely insane season 1 and overtaking everyone else is because Boomkin was also meta, but lots of these Resto Druid groups did not have boomkins in the group. And so like a lot of the power of the Resto Druid is if you do not have a boomkin, meaning you could bring some other good class, and there's plenty of good classes next year. I think Resto Druid is really, really good. It was tempting for me to put them in S, but I think the fact that Mark of the Wild is so much of the value and it could be a little bit redundant held it back. The other things that held it back is they do have mana issues, and also they do much lower damage. So mana issues, they don't necessarily always go like during boss fights, but they do need to sit down and actually drink during a dungeon. With things like stealth, and you could be a night elf and you can shadow meld, necessarily you aren't necessarily going to slow down your group, but there is a potential for you to slow down your group that way. Also, their damage is not that great. They got a new talent that increased their single target damage, which is really, really good. However, for the most part, they're the ones that are relying on things like damage trinkets and like the ring and stuff like that, and like these outside sources of damage, instead of where these other healers are mostly just relying on their own damage in order to be able to be competitive. Their saving grace, again, is that they're bringing Mark of the Wild. Like, they're the only druid that bringing Mark of the Wild that is such good DPS value that it makes up for it. And they have, you know, other great utility like battle res. Like, battle res used to make them absolutely dominant. Okay. So anyways, I'm putting them in the A tier. I could easily see them becoming S if Boomkin is not that popular though. So, we'll see. Okay, and that just leaves Restoration Shaman. So Restoration Shaman became really popular after 10.07 in the last patch. If you were playing this last patch, they have the shortest interrupt that you can get. They have a knockup on a 30-second CD, and they also have cap totem every minute, which is an AoE stun. What that means is, like, out of all the healers, their ability to just like constantly keep stopping mobs is really, really good. And I kept telling you at the beginning, this is looking like a meta with a lot of casters, so that is super amazing. For if that is like the kind of comp you are probably going to need a Resto Shaman to make that viable. Yes, prop paladins have a lot of kicks, but just the amount of stops that Resto Shaman brings is, it might carry like a super good comp like that. That's the main reason I'm going to be putting them in S. On top of that, they have so many healing CDs that are super powerful. The most like iconic ones being Ascendance and Spirit Link Totem. Spirit Link, super good. Ascendance is a big burst of healing. You can turn your Monotype Totem also into like a CD when you take another talent that makes it so your chain heals are faster. They got a bunch of buffs to chain heal, which make it so that it jumps really far and it has a really short cast time. That was like previously one of the bigger problems with chain heal inside of Mythic Plus environments, is that you need everybody to be relatively close, and sitting there and like casting a full chain heal was pretty frustrating. So that one talent that makes the reduced cast time and also makes it jump really far is super good. Chain heal is just like a turret of healing constantly, and then like timing that with things like Cloudburst, and then you're applying Ancestral Vigor, which gives everyone 10% HP. Whenever they put down Healing Rain, they do passive damage with Acid Rain. They do, like, when they have the opportunity to just sit there and do single target, they do some of the most single target of any healer right now, which I kept emphasizing is really important for a healer. So I think they're in an insane spot going into this next year. I do not think they have very many weaknesses, and that is definitely why I have put them in S in this tier list. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Good luck this tier with whatever you pick. Definitely do not, people always put this disclaimer at the beginning, play what you want to play, what you enjoy. In the end, that's going to be the healer that you're best at. But if you are just making a decision purely based on what looks like it's going to be best, this is my tier list, and thank you so much for watching.